One day, an ordinary life can shatter into pieces from a single, simple revelation. Grayson never suspected that his wife, with whom he had shared many years, was crafting a cunning plan to break him. This is a story about trust crumbling under the weight of manipulation, where kindness is mistaken for weakness. My friend, prepare yourself for a powerful tale of a man rising against deceit, changing the rules of the game, and taking revenge in a battle where the stakes are higher than ever. The usual way to tell this story would be to say that my wife's infidelity caught me off guard, that it was a shock, and that I had believed our marriage was as solid as a rock. However, if I'm being honest, cracks in our relationship had been forming for a long time. The true shock wasn't in discovering her infidelity, but in realizing that she seemed to expect I would simply accept her behavior without putting up a fight. This isn't just about infidelity. It's about the consequences of mistaking kindness for weakness. Let me introduce myself, my wife, and the story that brought us to this moment. My name is Grayson Scott. I'm 47 years old, and I've been married to Aria, who recently turned 45 for 25 years. We have a 23-year-old daughter, Lily, who is now in her first year of college. Although Aria and I have spent many years together, our relationship started deteriorating some time ago. Lately, Aria had grown more distant, her interest in our relationship fading. We were still close at times, but those moments were becoming increasingly rare. I sensed that with the approaching time when our daughter would leave home, Aria might have felt lost. Ironically, it was Lily who first noticed the oddities in her mother's behavior. She had come home for winter break, and on her last day before heading back to college, she needed a computer. Since I was working on mine, I suggested she use the old computer from the closet. I hadn't used it since I had gifted Aria a new laptop for her birthday a few months back. About half an hour later, Lily burst into my office, visibly upset. "Dad, what's with these videos?" she asked, her voice filled with anger and confusion. I looked at her, surprised. "What videos?" I asked. She slid the laptop over to me. The screen displayed an unnamed folder full of adult videos, all focused on themes of dominance and control. "Why would you even watch something like this? Since when are you into this stuff?" she demanded, clearly disturbed. Taken aback, I asked, "Wait, how do you even know about this? You're only 23. "Oh, Dad, I'm not a kid anymore," she replied, rolling her eyes. "When did this start?" After composing myself, I said, "Lily, this is your mother's computer. She's the only one who's been using it." We continued looking through the files and discovered other folders with articles on manipulating one's spouse. The timestamps showed that some of these files had been created several months ago. Realizing we had a little time before Aria would be home, I suggested we check her new laptop. Lily brought it over, and I turned off the old one. However, the new laptop was password protected. Leading Lily to Aria's desk, I pointed to a hidden drawer underneath. "Your mom isn't great at remembering passwords," I explained. "When she got her last laptop, I suggested she write down her passwords and keep them in a safe place." I opened the drawer and pulled out a sheet with our home passwords. Lily looked at it and frowned. "There's no password for the new laptop here." "Don't worry," I said, pulling out a second sheet I had seen in there before. "This is her secret list. I once saw her place it there, though I'd never had a reason to use it." I took a photo of the passwords and returned the paper to its place. After unlocking the laptop, we continued our search and found even more videos and articles on control and submission. Our investigation was suddenly interrupted by the sound of the garage door opening. We quickly turned off the computer and put everything back in place. What we found was disturbing, but there was no definitive evidence that Aria had acted beyond just watching these videos. Lily agreed to keep it a secret, as long as I promised to let her know if anything new came to light. When Lily returned to college, I continued the investigation on my own. She was convinced that her mother was involved in something more than just watching these videos. She had noticed the same changes in Aria that I had, although Aria's behavior toward her daughter had changed in a different way. Part of me hoped that this was just a temporary fascination for Arya, but I feared there was something much deeper behind it. After nearly a week balancing work and personal obligations, I finally had time to dive into the files on Arya's computer. While going through her browsing history, I stumbled upon an email account I hadn't known about. In her folders, I found an unsorted file with a list of clues that helped me crack her password and gain access to her private messages. What I discovered left me shocked. Her inbox was filled with messages, mostly between Arya and someone named Victoria. Victoria introduced herself as Arya's subordinate consultant, and their correspondence painted a disturbing picture. In her messages, Victoria urged Arya to make me a more submissive partner. Arya described me as compliant and accommodating, a person who rarely engaged in conflicts. Victoria seized on these traits, labeling me as the perfect candidate for submission, identifying me as weak and easily controlled. However, Arya expressed doubts about what to do if I started resisting. Victoria assured her that the threat of divorce would bring me back in line, warning that I would be left with nothing, supporting her and any future partners she might have. At that moment, I realized I knew almost nothing about divorce laws. From what I'd heard, divorce proceedings often leave men at a disadvantage, even those who haven't done anything wrong. Without wasting any time, I scheduled a meeting with one of the county's top divorce attorneys, Jackie Stone. After filling out initial paperwork with detailed information about our finances, Jackie spent a few days reviewing them. When I finally sat down in her office, her confident gaze reassured me. "Grayson," she began, "if it comes down to you living in a box, it'll be a very luxurious box. Trusting legal advice from someone who's not a lawyer and doesn't know the full picture is risky. If your wife decides to push this, she might be in for an unpleasant surprise. I doubt her so-called expert understands the contributions both of you bring to this partnership." Jackie laid out her plan. "Your wife's business is worth nearly $2 million, but her liquid assets are much lower. We can demand half the value of her business up front, which would force her to come up with $1 million or potentially sell the company. Given that your incomes are comparable, she won't qualify for spousal support. And though I can't officially recommend it, setting up a trust with a home equity loan will protect Lily's college fund, making it inaccessible. Retirement savings will be split equally." I asked if it would make sense to file for divorce on grounds of infidelity. She replied that it wouldn't affect the division of assets, but having proof of an affair could encourage Arya to settle in my favor to avoid a public scandal. Jackie agreed to prepare all necessary documents and wait for my signal. While I didn't have solid evidence of an affair, Arya's messages hinted at intentions that could lead us down that path. Meanwhile, I had time to secure our finances. Later, I shared everything with Lily, explaining what I'd found and Jackie's opinion. She was stunned. "Does she really think she can make you into a submissive husband?" she asked, shocked. "After everything, she assumes you'll just go along with this?" "To some extent, it's my fault," I admitted. "I've given in to her wishes too often. That ends now." "Wait," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe it's not the right time to confront her about it. What if she just goes underground? For now, play by her rules. You might be able to gather more information." I nodded, considering her advice. You might be right. I continued monitoring Arya's secret correspondence, noting Victoria's latest instructions. Victoria advised Arya to become increasingly cold and demanding, to shift more household responsibilities onto me, and to deny intimacy. The strategy was for Arya to use affection sparingly, rewarding me only when I fully met her expectations. Victoria urged Arya to criticize my every action, find flaws, and withhold intimacy if I did anything wrong. She explained that my tolerance of such treatment would be proof of my willingness to become the submissive husband she wanted. Though I wanted to confront her, I recalled Victoria's advice to Arya. If I didn't submit, she should switch tactics and find subtle ways to humiliate me. The trap was set, But this time, it wasn't for me. Following Lily's advice, I agreed to her plan, taking on the role of the submissive husband, just as Arya expected. I followed her directions, carrying out every instruction without resistance. My disdain for Arya ran so deep that the lack of intimacy was barely noticeable, though I pretended to be hurt when she withheld affection, all to maintain the illusion. The end of this ordeal felt near when I discovered a letter from Arya confiding in Victoria that she had found her bull. This so-called bull turned out to be a sales representative from one of the suppliers Arya worked with. Victoria encouraged her to try this man before revealing her new plans to me. I clung to a faint hope that Arya might change her mind before fully betraying me. But that hope vanished a week later when I came across another letter in which Arya wrote to Victoria, "I was with him in every way. I'm ready to make my husband submissive." It didn't take long to figure out who this bull was. Gabriel Torres's name appeared more frequently in her letters, and one time he even thanked her for an unforgettable evening. In his last message, sent the day before, he expressed impatience for their next meeting. He mentioned he had considered their arrangement and eagerly anticipated the chance to humiliate me. He even wrote that he couldn't wait for me to submit. A quick search provided all the information I needed on Gabriel Torres. The idea of him as a bull was almost laughable. If I had his details correct, and I was certain I did, he stood around 5 feet 10 inches and weighed 180 pounds. In contrast, I was just over 6 feet and weighed roughly 200 pounds. Yes, he was 9 years younger, but judging by his photos, I was confident I could handle him any day. Gabriel worked as a sales rep supplying Arya's business, and he had a wife and 2 young children. I felt sorry for his family, knowing the upheaval they would face. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued tracking their correspondence, gathering more evidence. Gabriel even sent Arya several explicit photos, which not only confirmed their affair, but provided me with enough material to shatter his family. The final letter confirmed everything. Arya informed Victoria that she was ready to proceed with the plan. Arya was certain I would accept her new rules, and her bull was fully on board. The big reveal was scheduled for Friday evening. Arya planned to present her new rules to me before Gabriel arrived, threatening divorce if I didn't comply immediately. She mentioned a special gift for me, something she said would put me in my place. Victoria assured her that, judging by my previous compliance, I would obey without question. I had 3 days to prepare, and I put my own plan into action. My lawyer had already prepared the divorce papers, and everything was ready. I also found Gabriel's wife's contact information. When I shared the details with Lily, she was shocked but respected my approach. Lily was prepared to support me when the moment came. On Friday, Arya was seated at the kitchen table, and her posture revealed a slight tension. As I entered the room, I discreetly activated a digital recorder hidden in my pocket. She broke the silence. "Grayson, sit down. We need to talk." I kept my composure. "Can I change first?" Her tone hardened. "No, sit down and listen. Don't interrupt." I complied, placing my briefcase beside me and signaling her to continue. "We're making some changes and you will accept them," she stated coldly, finally laying down her terms. "First," she declared, "my lover will be coming to this house tonight, and we'll be together." She spoke without hesitation, clearly laying out her demands. "Afterward, you'll handle the cleanup, prepare him for next time, and take care of any household duties I assign." She paused and I asked, "Is that all?" "No," she replied, a triumphant smile on her face. "I have a gift for you. You'll start wearing it immediately and only I will have the key. Go on, open it." She nudged the gift box toward me, her gaze locked onto mine, throwing down a silent challenge. Slowly I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a layer of soft tissue paper, lay a chastity cage, the very one I recognized from a few videos on Arya's computer. I picked it up, trying to process what I was seeing. "Well, had enough of watching?" she asked, her voice steady, though I detected a flicker of nervousness. It was clear she hadn't anticipated my reaction. "Yes, I understand everything," I replied calmly. "I get it. It's a big step. But trust me, you'll adjust and follow instructions." Her eyes widened, surprised by my response. Clearly, she'd expected meek compliance. Her jaw tightened. "If you resist, there will be consequences," she warned. I quietly smirked. "Are we really going down this path?" I asked, leaning back. She nodded, perhaps a bit hastily. "Isn't this the moment when you threaten to leave me with nothing? To take everything I have, leaving me without a roof over my head?" Her voice wavered, but she responded, "Yes, if you don't comply, that's exactly how it'll go. So you'd better start obeying." Her confidence faltered momentarily, and I saw a shadow of doubt cross her eyes. I took my phone and sent a pre-prepared email to Gabriel's wife. Then I dialed Lily. "Hey, darling," I said casually. "Guess what? Your mom just gave me a chastity cage. Looks like she expects me to wear it." Arya's face darkened. "Put the phone down. Who do you think you're talking to?" she snapped, her voice tinged with irritation. I looked her calmly in the eyes before replying to Lily, "All right, sweetheart. I've got something to take care of. I'll call you back later." I hung up, turned to Arya, and said softly but firmly, "Never interrupt me when I'm speaking to my daughter." The impact was immediate. She froze, speechless. "Good," I said, pausing. "Now let's clear things up. You're planning to bring someone over tonight, and I'm supposed to sit and watch. Meanwhile, you'll hold the key to this cage, and if I refuse, you'll take everything I've earned, leaving me with nothing. Did I miss anything?" Her confidence returned, and she smirked, replying, "Yes, that's exactly right." Without a word, I took my case, placed it on the table, and opened it. "Arya, take your phone. I think it's time you called Gabriel." Her face turned pale. "What are you talking about? Who is Gabriel?" I took her phone, easily unlocked it, and quickly found Gabriel's number. I pressed call and put it on speaker. "Stop! You don't even know who Gabriel is." Her courage vanished the moment Gabriel picked up on the other end. "Hello, darling," came his pleased voice. "So, how did your husband react? Is he on board?" "Apologies, Gabriel," I said, relishing the sudden silence. "Seems like I'm that pushover you were expecting. I have a few questions." Silence fell on the other end as I looked at Arya, who seemed crushed. "When you started seeing my wife, did you happen to mention that you're married with 2 young children?" Arya's eyes widened. She was clearly unprepared for this turn. The silence on the other end was heavy, and I chuckled quietly. "Don't worry, Gabriel. I already informed your wife. I'm sure the photos I sent her will come in handy in her own divorce proceedings, just as they will in mine." Finally, Gabriel's voice broke through, filled with rage. If you think you can just—" "Choose your words carefully, Gabriel," I interrupted, pulling a gun from my case and placing it on the table in front of Arya. She gasped, covering her mouth with trembling hands. "Quiet, Arya," I said calmly, never breaking eye contact. "Let's get to the point, Gabriel. How well do you know firearms?" I asked, with a sharp metallic click as I cocked my pistol. "In case you don't know, that sound means there's a .45 caliber bullet in the chamber, and lately I've been thinking about the power this cartridge holds." I let the silence hang, allowing the tension to press on both of us. "So if you show up at my door, I think we'll both get a close look at that power." I waited, watching Arya's expression change as her calm began to waver. I said, noting the call had disconnected. "Looks like he hung up. Didn't even wait to hear about the letters I was planning to send his boss. I wonder if he knows that his company frowns upon relationships between clients and employees." I turned to Arya, whose tense posture betrayed her unease. "Sit down, Arya. You were right. We need to have a serious talk." I picked up a small cage from the table, raising an eyebrow. "It's tiny. Did you really think I'd fit in it?" I tossed the cage to her, letting her feel the cold evidence of her short-sightedness. "This," I said icily, "is just one of the many mistakes you've made in your scheme, my dear wife. Did you really think I'd play along?" She hesitated. Her voice caught in her throat as I pulled a neat folder from my briefcase and slid it across the table. What? What is this? She asked, her voice trembling. It's a divorce petition, I answered calmly. My attorney, an actual attorney unlike your online advisor, suggested I remind you not to trust legal advice from strangers on the internet. The gist? No, you won't get everything, and no, I'm not about to live in a box. Let's go over our shared assets. I'm sure your expert promised you'd keep it all. Her face went pale. This can't be true, right? She whispered. I'm afraid it is. We live in a community property state, meaning everything is split 50-50. Yes, that includes half of your business, something I doubt you mentioned to your online guru. If I remember correctly, your company is valued at around $2 million, right? I'm taking $1 million in cash. But that appraisal was inflated for a loan, she protested, her voice tinged with panic. I don't actually have those assets. Then it looks like you'll have to sell the business, I replied without a hint of hesitation. As for alimony, I'm not even asking for it. Luckily for you, your salary, along with perks like a company car and travel expenses, is fairly close to mine. Her frustration simmered. You know you make more than I do. That's your belief, based on your online lawyer. Your so-called income includes everything you siphon from the business, all those little extras. Unfortunately, selling the company might be the only way to fulfill the terms. Her face flushed with anger. You planned this, didn't you? I shrugged. No, Arya, you planned it. I'm just responding to your choices. So how's that plan working out for you now? She gave in, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please, Grayson, she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't want it to go this far. Is there anything we can do to make this right? You want me to fix this? I looked at her incredulously. You tried to trap me, Arya. I don't know what drove you to this, but I'm not playing your game anymore. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You know, I've been aware of your little plot for a while now. This only confirmed my suspicions. You see kindness as weakness. Consider this my final act of goodwill. From now on, I'll treat you the way you've treated me. Her sobs grew louder. Grayson, please, she whispered, her voice shaking. I was just looking for a thrill. I got carried away. Can't we just forget all of this? I realize now how wrong I was. I looked at her, remaining unmoved. A thrill, huh? That's what you wanted, isn't it? I'm giving you exactly what you deserve, I said coldly, my words slicing through the tense silence. Imagine what it's like to stand across from me in divorce court. Think about how you'll explain to everyone who you've become, a wife who betrayed our trust. Picture your business falling apart to cover the debt you owe me. Every piece of that collapse is your legacy. Arya kept begging, tears streaming down her face, swearing she regretted everything, insisting none of this was ever her plan. She'd been crying for over an hour when a loud, sharp knock on the door shattered the quiet. I had a good idea who it might be. Reaching for my gun, I cautiously approached the door. Before I could get too close, I heard an enraged voice outside shouting, "Open up, you bastard!" I stepped back, pulled out my phone, and quickly dialed 911. I need officers here immediately. My wife's lover is threatening me, I calmly reported. I don't know if he's armed, but I am. Without hanging up, I placed the phone nearby and stayed close enough to hear what was happening. Gabriel, step away from my door, I shouted. The police are already on their way. But Gabriel only pounded on the door harder, his fists echoing throughout the house as he tried to break in. I'm going to kill you, he screamed. For a fleeting moment, I considered opening the door, letting him storm in, and ending this once and for all. But then, I heard the sound of sirens. Through the door, I could hear officers barking orders, telling Gabriel to raise his hands and step back. He resisted, and one of the officers shouted, "Put your hands up!" I later learned that Gabriel's wife had been shattered after reading the letter I sent her. She had fled to her father, who lived nearby, And when he found out, he went to confront Gabriel right before Gabriel drove to my place. Gabriel barely managed to escape, but not without consequences. His car was dented and scratched, as if someone had taken a baseball bat to it. Perhaps if his father-in-law had stopped him, Gabriel wouldn't have ended up in jail that night. After the incident, I obtained a restraining order against Gabriel, though I wouldn't need it until his release. I also warned Arya that I'd file a similar order if she refused to move out. Reluctantly, she left, though she contested my every move. She kept trying to contact me, pleading that she never wanted a divorce. Eventually, she hired a lawyer who demanded an in-person meeting to discuss the divorce terms. My lawyer, Mrs. Stone, warned me beforehand, "Be ready. Arya's attorney is known for his talk. Lots of noise, but not much action." As expected, Arya and her attorney tried every tactic to sway me. She played the sweet, innocent role. "This was all a horrible mistake," she whispered. "I thought it might somehow bring us closer. I swear nothing went that far between Gabriel and me. I never cheated on you." I just stared at her, unblinking, showing no emotion. Annoyed, her attorney intervened. "Mr. Scott, we're prepared to dismiss these baseless accusations against Mrs. Scott. But if you insist on pursuing this, we'll countersue for defamation." I smirked and exchanged a glance with Mrs. Stone. "You were right," I said. She opened a folder and calmly handed a series of photos to Arya and her attorney. "These photos may tell a different story," she said calmly. "Here's one of you and Gabriel in a rather compromising position. Would you say that's not infidelity?" She flipped to the next photo. "And here he is behind you. Perhaps you'll say that's not you, but I'd recognize that birthmark on your thigh anywhere." She paused and handed over the last photo. "And here you are on top of him. Gabriel certainly enjoys taking pictures." I locked eyes with Arya, letting the silence settle before looking away. "I'm not stopping this divorce. Fight all you want, but it's over for me." With these words, I handed another photograph to her lawyer. "This is the prison she designed for me. No, I won't forgive or forget." Arya and her lawyer began whispering quietly. It was clear she hadn't warned him that Gabriel had photos. The tension in the room thickened, but I only caught her whisper. "He claimed he had pictures, but I didn't believe him." I closed my eyes. I hadn't managed to keep a close watch on Gabriel while he was with me. Mrs. Stone suggested a break so the lawyers could speak with us separately. She and I exchanged a quiet chuckle as we left the room. When we returned, Arya's demeanor had changed. The sweetness, the innocent mask, it was all gone. Her lawyer spoke up. "We're requesting family counseling." Mrs. Stone had already anticipated this. I assured her I'd attend as many sessions as needed. "If counseling doesn't help," he added, "we'll move on to asset division." "Your division proposal is absurd," he continued, pulling out a folder detailing our assets. "Demanding $1 million from your wife's business is outrageous. An independent valuation will be necessary before we discuss figures." Arya looked straight at me and said, "You know my business is nowhere near worth that much." My lawyer shot me a quick, confident look and opened her folder, handing a document to Arya. "Mrs. Scott, you might recognize this. Your business loan application. Flip to the last page and you'll see your sworn signature. After notarization, you sent this to the bank. By signing this document, you affirmed that the value of your business exceeded $2 million. This amount secured your loan. If you're now claiming that figure was false, that raises serious concerns. This wouldn't just be perjury. Mailing it adds a layer of mail fraud. I'm sure your lawyer, though not a criminal attorney, understands the severity of federal mail fraud charges." "Well, Arya, it seems the cage you built for me may just become your own," I said with a dry smirk. Arya's face turned pale, and she glanced at her lawyer, who pulled her aside. They exchanged tense words, and soon after her lawyer announced the meeting's conclusion. 10 days later, I was shocked to find Arya on my doorstep. She looked exhausted and disheveled. Her hair was a mess, dark circles under her eyes. "Please, Grayson, we need to talk." I opened the door and let her in. Didn't we already talk that night you tried to turn me into a broken and defeated husband? I led her to the kitchen table. So what do you want, Arya? I can't take this anymore, Grayson. I've been reckless and foolish. I'm losing everything, even my peace of mind. Lily won't take my calls anymore. Every time I try, she calls me a traitor and hangs up. My business is collapsing, and you're pushing to have me thrown in jail. My parents are ashamed of me. I overheard my father telling my mother he wants me out of the house for betraying you. And to top it all off, even Gabriel's wife showed up at my parents' place, threatening to disgrace me publicly. I looked at her calmly. It seems justice is finally catching up with you. Isn't that so? Tears streamed down her face. You won't really send me to prison, will you? That's not up to me, I replied. Perhaps your own actions will lead you there. Weren't you the one who wanted to cage me? It seems the key is now in my hand. I'm genuinely astonished that you could think I'd ever be able to accept this. I'm sorry. I got caught up in what I was reading online. A woman convinced me you'd understand. She insisted that, by taking on household duties without complaint, you were somehow signaling a desire to play a more passive role, Arya explained. Or perhaps, I'm simply a husband who wants to make his wife happy. Arya, this ends here. I won't back down. I don't want my willingness to compromise to be mistaken for weakness. Forget about the idea of counseling, and maybe think about selling your business. She decided to change her attorney, choosing someone who could take a tougher stance. Her new lawyer didn't sugarcoat the reality. They had a difficult case ahead. He advised her to brace herself for the likelihood of losses. 3 months later, we found ourselves again in my lawyer's office. Arya looked as exhausted as she had the day she first showed up at my doorstep. When she walked in, she seemed completely drained. Mrs. Stone informed me that Arya had managed to secure a contract for the sale of her business. After settling her debts, she would have around $800,000 remaining. Initially, they offered us half, but we refused and negotiated the full amount. This meeting was necessary to finalize the last financial details of the divorce. Arya's lawyer cleared his throat and handed a file to my attorney. My client has accepted your latest offer, he said. Mr. Scott will become the sole owner of the shared home. Both parties will retain their respective retirement accounts. The bank accounts will be divided equally, 50-50ths. There was only the matter of the business, which the buyer was prepared to purchase for $800,000. Once she receives the payment, Mr. Scott will be issued a check for $400,000. I assume there's no need to formally mention Mr. Scott's decision to withhold certain details from the credit documents. Mrs. Stone stood up. No, that doesn't need to be formalized. We just need to sign the divorce documents and complete the settlement. I believe that concludes our work here. Looking at Arya, I felt a fleeting sympathy as tears streamed down her cheeks. She lifted her eyes to me. Can we speak privately for a few minutes? She asked softly. I looked at Mrs. Stone and nodded, indicating I would agree. The others left the room, leaving the two of us alone. I'm so sorry, Grayson, she whispered. I understand that I've destroyed any chance of you ever trusting me again, but can you help me with Lily? Our daughter refuses to speak to me kindly and won't agree to meet. When we communicate, all she does is yell at me. I'm desperate. What did you expect? I replied. Did you think she'd support you after you tried to control me and brought other men into your life? I can't change her perspective. You'll have to deal with this on your own. Arya lowered her head and slowly left the room. I felt tempted to ask how she was coping with the chaos she had created herself, but that would have only added to her pain. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the Force be with you.